You are standing on the banks of the Vologne River in the chill of a French autumn twilight. The air is thick with mist, smelling of wet earth and decaying leaves. Flashlights cut through the darkness, their beams dancing frantically across the black, rushing water. Suddenly, a light stops. It fixes on a small, dark shape wedged against the rocks. Your heart sinks as you step closer. It's a child, 4-year-old Grégory Villemin. He looks almost peaceful, as if he is sleeping, but his tiny hands and feet are bound tightly with ropes, and a woolen cap is pulled completely down over his face. Just hours ago, he was playing happily in the front yard of his home in Léponges-sur-Vologne while his mother, Christine, stayed inside to do chores. In a matter of minutes, he vanished into thin air. By 5:30 p.m., before the police even know where to look, an anonymous, distorted voice calls Grégory's uncle with a chilling message. "I have taken the boy. I have thrown him into the Vologne." This is not just a tragic kidnapping. This is the culmination of a calculated, years-long campaign of terror against a single family. And it is about to tear an entire country apart. To understand the horror of what happened to little Grégory, we have to look backward. For 3 years leading up to the murder, the extended Villemin family was systematically terrorized by a malicious, anonymous tormentor. In France, anonymous letter writers and harassers are known as le Corbeau, the Crow. The Crow knew everything. They knew the family's schedules, their secrets, their petty grievances, and their financial situations. The primary target was Grégory's father, Jean-Marie Villemin, a hardworking young man who had recently risen to a foreman position at a local factory. This success bred bitter jealousy among his extended relatives, many of whom felt he was arrogant. The day after Grégory's body was pulled from the river, the mail carrier delivered a final, sickening letter to the grieving parents. It read simply, "I have taken vengeance." The investigation that followed became a masterclass in judicial incompetence, media sensationalism, and tribal warfare. The first primary suspect was Bernard Laroche, a cousin of Jean-Marie Villemin. A young girl named Muriel Ball, Laroche's sister-in-law, initially gave a bombshell statement to the police, claiming she was in the car with Laroche when he kidnapped Grégory. Handwriting experts also tied Laroche to the Crow's letters. He was arrested in November 1984. However, the case collapsed almost as quickly as it came together. Muriel Ball recanted her testimony days later, claiming the police had terrified and coerced her into lying. With the evidence suddenly rendered flimsy, a young, inexperienced investigating judge named Jean-Michel Lambert ordered Laroche released in February 1985. Driven mad by grief and convinced the justice system had failed his son, Jean-Marie Villemin took matters into his own hands. In March 1985, in broad daylight, Jean-Marie confronted Laroche as he left for work and shot him dead with a shotgun. Jean-Marie would later serve 2.5 years in prison for the murder. With Laroche dead, the investigation took a bizarre, sexist, and highly controversial turn. Under immense pressure from a ravenous media mob, authorities turned their sights on Grégory's own mother, Christine Villemin. Handwriting analysts claimed she might be the Crow. The famous French writer Marguerite Duras even published a sensational essay essentially declaring Christine guilty based entirely on psychological intuition. Christine, who was pregnant, went on an 11-day hunger strike, suffered a miscarriage losing one of the twins she carried, and was subjected to years of intense public scrutiny before being completely cleared of all charges in 1993 due to an absolute lack of evidence. Decades passed, and advanced forensic technology was repeatedly deployed. DNA testing was performed on the stamps, the ropes, and Grégory's clothing in 2000, 2008, and 2013, but every test returned inconclusive results. The case refused to die, yielding surreal twists like the 2017 suicide of the original judge, Jean-Michel Lambert, who killed himself after the case was reopened and his early blunders were thrust back into the spotlight. As true crime creators, looking past the chaotic timeline allows us to dissect the criminal psychology driving this case. The affair Grégory is highly unique because the murder was not an isolated outburst. It was the grand finale of a prolonged, obsessive psychological campaign. The Crow's behavior points toward a classic grievance-driven malicious harasser. This profile is fueled entirely by severe resentment, deep-seated inferiority, and pathological jealousy. Jean-Marie's modest professional promotion acted as a narcissistic injury to the perpetrator. The choice of anonymous letters and phone calls tells us a lot about the killer's psyche. The need for control. The perpetrator felt powerless in their own life. By controlling the emotional state of the Villemin family, they experienced a god-like rush of power. Cowardice versus omnipotence. The killer lacked the courage to confront Jean-Marie directly. Anonymity allowed them to feel omnipotent and untouchable while minimizing personal risk. Proximity and voyeurism. The letters contained hyper-specific, intimate details about the family. Psychologically, this means the killer was highly likely an insider, someone sitting at the dinner table, attending family gatherings, and actively watching the Villemins unravel in real time. The terror was a spectator sport for them. Most anonymous harassers never escalate to physical violence. When they do, it signifies a profound psychological shift. The killer moved from attacking Jean-Marie's peace of mind to executing his child. In behavioral psychology, this is known as proximate violence or vengeance filicide. The killer didn't want to kill Jean-Marie. They wanted Jean-Marie to live a long life entirely destroyed by grief. Destroying the ultimate symbol of Jean-Marie's happiness, his beautiful, thriving 4-year-old son, was the ultimate act of psychological castration against the father. The methodology of the murder reveals a chilling lack of empathy mixed with high emotional calculation. Binding the victim. Tying Grégory's hands and feet, and pulling the hat over his face, served two psychological functions. First, it completely immobilized a helpless child, ensuring total compliance. Second, pulling the hat over the face is a common psychological mechanism called depersonalization. It allows the killer to detach from the humanity of the victim, making it easier to carry out the act of throwing him into the river without looking into his eyes. The immediate call. The killer called the family almost immediately after the abduction. This proves that the primary thrill for the perpetrator was not the murder itself, but the immediate, crushing despair of the parents. They wanted to witness the exact moment the Villemin family's world shattered. The murder of Grégory Villemin remains unsolved not because it was a perfect crime, but because it was a tribal crime. The psychology at play is one of collective omerta, silence, born out of toxic family dynamics. The killer was driven by a burning, poisonous envy so intense that it overrode the natural human instinct to protect a child. They hid behind anonymous letters, leveraged a botched police investigation, and relied on family loyalty to bury the truth in the dark, rushing waters of the Vologne.